This video could get me a little bit of trouble these days because everybody's turned upside down from the way things used to be, and I'm going to explain this in a moment. The liberals continue to rehabilitate George W. Bush. This has been a thing since the Donald Trump presidency, and it's really just perplexing what Trump derangement syndrome will do to the psyche of the American liberal these days. Now, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of areas where Donald Trump needed to be challenged and everything like that. But you don't go and rehabilitate one of the worst presidents we ever had. And yes, George W. Bush was probably the worst president we had in over 100 in the last 100 years. He's the worst president this country's had. I make no apologies for what I'm about to say. And yeah, and there's been a lot of presidents. Actually, most presidents have done some shitty things over the years. Every one of them, even some of the quote unquote better presidents, have done some shitty things too. But during the 9/11 commemoration speech, George W. Bush spoke and was praised highly by liberals. The rehabilitation of America's worst president we ever had in the last century, as I said, it perplexes me as a leftist. Glenn Greenwald from System Update explains this, and I'll add my modest comments afterwards. Give me a moment here. This system thing that I'm trying to do to get everything. I'm gonna learn how to do this eventually, and be a little more smooth about it. Okay.
Hey everyone, it's Glenn Greenwald back with a new episode of System Update exclusively on Rumble. And I wanted to discuss the, I think, quite fascinating reaction to this speech delivered on September 11th by former President George W. Bush. He was speaking at a ceremony at the site where the plane on 9/11 crashed in Pennsylvania, along with others such as former Vice President Dick Cheney and current Vice President Kamala Harris. And he gave a speech that was remarkably well received by numerous prominent liberals for reasons I think are quite important to understand, particularly his attempt to equate the war on terror that he launched and the people at whom that war on terror was directed with the current domestic war on terror that liberals are launching and the people at whom they're launching it, which are their political adversaries here in the United States. So if you look at how media outlets described Bush's comments, here, for example, you can see CNN, who promoted the speech, and underneath it says, Bush alludes to January 6th while condemning 9/11 terrorists. And that was absolutely the connection he intended to be drawn and was drawn by numerous liberals, essentially saying that there was a similarity between the attacks on September 11th and the Capitol riot on January 6th, and that the people who perpetrated the attacks on September 11th and killed 3,000 people all at once are very similar to the people who are responsible for right-wing extremism in the United States, including those who did 1/6. Now let's listen to the specific passage that became the most consequential and important one, the one that CNN is referencing here.
And we have seen growing evidence that the dangers to our country can come not only across borders, but from violence that gathers within. There is little cultural overlap between violent extremists abroad and violent extremists at home. But in their disdain for pluralism, in their disregard for human life, in their determination to defile national symbols, they are children of the same foul spirit, and it is our continuing duty to confront them.
Now, what I found so fascinating about the reaction to the speech from liberals is a number of things, beginning with, let's remember how liberals talked about George W. Bush at the time that he was actually the president, because it's very radically different from how they talked about him yesterday and how they've been talking about him ever since he began condemning Donald Trump. There's a lot of historical revisionism going on. Maybe some people don't remember how liberals spoke about him during his presidency. Maybe some people have forgotten, but it's really worth revisiting what they said. So here, for example, is a New York Times report in January of 2004 discussing the tendency on the part of liberals to compare George W. Bush to Adolf Hitler. It was prompted by an ad by the liberal advocacy group Move On that was a contestant in a Move On ad that directly compared Bush to Hitler. But in general, the comparison between George Bush and Adolf Hitler was a common and a commonly accepted one in liberal discourse that led to that New York Times article. Very often as well, there would be attempts to compare the Bush family to Adolf Hitler. Here you see The Guardian in September of 2004, so shortly before the election, with an article entitled How Bush's Grandfather Helped Hitler's Rise to Power, so trying to connect George Bush and his family to the rise of Adolf Hitler. Here from CNN in 2013, there is an article that argues that George Bush, along with Tony Blair, should be charged with war crimes. So he is like Hitler, his family's linked to Hitler, and the rise of Hitler, he's a war criminal. Here we have an article in New York Magazine from 2012 by Jonathan Chait saying, yes, Bush versus Gore did steal the election. That is a common theme still to this very day in liberalism, that George Bush stole the 2000 election, that the results of the 2000 election were illegitimate. They were the byproduct of Bush stealing the election. And they think the same thing about the 2004 election. So here's an article from CNN in January of 2005 on how members of Congress, the Democrats in Congress, were challenging Ohio's electoral votes. Ohio was the key state that swung George Bush's re-election over John Kerry. And you can see the first paragraph of CNN alleging widespread, quote, irregularities on Election Day. A group of Democrats in Congress objected Thursday to the counting of Ohio's 20 electoral votes, delaying the official certification of the 2004 presidential election. So they also thought he stole both the 2000 and the 2004 election. Many people thought his victory in each was illegitimate, much like Republicans now believe about Joe Biden and much like Democrats believed about Trump's victory in 2016. So that's how George Bush was talked about. And just to give you a sense of how extreme it is, a lot of prominent liberals believe that George Bush was actually responsible for the 9/11 attack, either planning it and participating in its execution along with Dick Cheney, or negligently and purposely allowing it to happen. The current MSN.
Okay. Okay, well, the video's about 32 minutes, but you get the gist of what he's trying to say here. At least I hope so. And thing about it is, overall, what he's trying to say is that, you know, those of us on the left, and this is how I'm interpreting it, those of us on the left need to be remaining consistent civil libertarians. So basically, the liberals cheered George W. Bush because of the war on terror abroad, that they kind of did not like the tactics that were used or what have you. And as far as being one of those kind of liberals, you know, yeah, Glenn Greenwald was with them. Pretty much everybody on the left. If there was any unity on the left, whether they were corporate Democrats or actual street fighting leftists, not literally street fighting, but you know what I mean. They were all like, George W. Bush is a piece of shit. And he was. He still is. But some on the liberal left and some liberals today, corporate Democrats and some actual leftists, are finding George W. Bush and looking at him in a positive light. Now, And part of the reason is this clamoring for a war on domestic terror. And I can understand because of what those awful people did on January 6th. Make no mistake, what those people did with that insurrection was awful, horrible. I mean, they tried to, in their ignorance, they thought that storming the Capitol, that they were going to overthrow the U.S. government. Some of them did. They let their emotions get away. I don't think it was planned. I think it was accidental. They let their emotions get the best of them. I like what Kyle Kalinske have said. He said this was not a coup. This was a diet coup. And that's kind of where I stand. Now, there were a lot of liberals and maybe some moderate conservatives are wanting to declare war on what they perceive as domestic terrorism against, right-wing militias and white nationalists and those types. Now, make no mistake, these militia people are awful, and white nationalists are awful by virtue of what they believe in. But there is a price to be paid by going overboard in trying to take away the civil liberties of political people you do not like. Because look, if there is going to be a Republican Congress coming back, and I'm betting that the Republicans are going to retake Congress in 2022, they have tried to ban or declare Antifa and Black Lives Matter a terrorist organization, terrorist movement. They tried to literally ban BDS, boycott, disinvestment, and sanctions. Now, and they want to do it without due process. So, all you liberals out there, and I'm with you, I hate hatred, I hate racism, I hate bigotry of any sort. But if you're going to go after domestic right-wing terrorists, or what you suspect are domestic right-wing terrorists, and that's a pretty broad term for some on the left, because it could mean a center-rightish Republican all the way to Timothy McVeigh, a Timothy McVeigh-like figure. So some of you liberals, be careful what you wish for, because believe me, when the Republicans get back in power, they're going to try the same shit on Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Now, to make a clarification, Black Lives Matter is not a terrorist movement. Antifa is not a terrorist movement. And I just want to make that clear. But the reason I mention them is in the eyes of those on the right, they look at Black Lives Matter and they look at Antifa as a terrorist group in the same way that people on the left may look at the Proud Boys, for example, or Tea Party activists during the Obama years as domestic terrorists. And that's basically the point I'm trying to make. And the thing about it is that the messenger, Glenn Greenwald. And I want to make a little side note about Glenn Greenwald, because there's been also division on Glenn Greenwald in I would say probably in the past, maybe the past a year or two, seemingly. I know certainly this year that they have decided to demonize Glenn Greenwald and declare him some kind of a crypto secret fascist or what have you. And must I say this again over and over? To call Glenn Greenwood a fascist or what have you. We're talking, and I said this before and I'll say it again, we're talking about a Jewish gay man married to a brown-skinned man by the name of David Miranda down in Brazil, who is a member of Congress in the Brazilian parliament with a Trotskyite political party called the Socialism and Liberty Party, which is a split from the Workers' Party, the party of Lula da Silva. Some people have even made claims that Glenn Greenwald wants to see Jair Bolsonaro reelected, when actually Glenn Greenwald played a role in having Lula da Silva freed from prison. Lula da Silva is likely to defeat likely to defeat Jair Bolsonaro in the upcoming election in Brazil. And Glenn Greenwald will be the one partially responsible, or largely responsible rather, for Lula da Silva coming back into power. So I just want to make that very clear. And Anna Kasparian is wrong when she refers to Glenn Greenwald as the latest wave of Dave Reubenites. That's just absolutely wrong. Very wrong. But anyway, that's my side note. I want to talk about this whole thing with George W. Bush again. George W. Bush was hated by the liberals during the Bush-Cheney era, and he was hated as the governor of Texas, too. And look at all the people he murdered. He just didn't murder Arabs abroad. He murdered fellow Texans as the governor of Texas, because the death penalty is terrorism against the people too. And George W. Bush was a high proponent of the capital punishment. At the same time, while liberals justifiably dislike and despise George W. Bush, Donald Trump was loved by these same liberals. Donald Trump voted for Barack Obama in 2008. Donald Trump was friends with both Bill and Hillary Clinton. Rumor has it, and Kim Iverson mentioned this, rumor has it that Bill Clinton encouraged Donald Trump to run for president and to declare his candidacy to make it easier for Hillary Clinton to win. And I actually, to this day, believe that conversation happened. I really do. Another thing is that Donald Trump was very close with Chuck Schumer, and Donald Trump was also very close with Nancy Pelosi. And believe me, when he was giving money to all those people, they weren't objecting to it. They were not. So and that's needed to be cleared. The current bunch of right-wingers that are simps for Donald Trump, the neocons, some of them were former never-Trumpers that got an erection once Donald Trump became president and started governing like a conventional Republican. Tax cuts for the wealthy, and killing Qasem Soleimani, the general in Iran, by the drone attacks in Baghdad, destroying the peace deal between the United States and Iran, declaring war against the people of Venezuela, that sort of thing. Some of those neocons were like, "Oh, he's our guy. He even appointed John Bolton as national security advisor." So, you got that, and then you got some of the anarcho-capitalists who were kind of outside the system. The libertarians, some fringe libertarians, all of a sudden they got a hard-on for Donald Trump. And then of course the Christian right. Any Republican since Ronald Reagan. Every Republican that got the Republican nomination for president, they have a hard-on for their Republican candidate for president, because any Democrat that's a president is the embodiment of evil. You got overt racists and quiet racists, especially since the days of Southern strategy, have always consistently voted for the Republicans. Not saying that all Republicans are racist, or even most Republicans are racist. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that there is a faction of Republicans that do vote Republican on the race question, and then the thing about it is, all these people, they basically they're Republican first, and they lack principle, and everything else is just secondary. Democrats are evil is their mindset. So they worship George W. Bush back then, and today they worship Donald Trump, and many of them can't even get over the fact that Donald Trump lost the election. Of course, I will have just maybe a small little bit of empathy there, only in this respect, because I'm still not over Bernie Sanders getting cheated in 2016, and I'm still not over Bernie Sanders getting cheated in 2020, even though I have lost a little bit of faith in Bernie Sanders. But that's another story for another time. But the thing about it is, while some went on, some of the more right, basically, when somebody comes along in the Republican Party further right than Trump in rhetoric, it'll get the right wing all excited, and they'll forget about Trump. And if they manage to get elected as president, what's going to happen is that Donald Trump's going to see what they're doing and be like, "Oh, gee, That's pretty horrible. That's fucked up. And then he's gonna make a big speech about it, and all the liberals there have rehabilitated George W. Bush. Mark my words, you'll see Barack Obama and Michelle Obama both at a cocktail party with Donald Trump exchanging pleasantries. Mark my words, you know where you heard it first. So, it's not just George W. Bush, and Lynn Cheney, Liz Cheney, Lynn Cheney, and people like that, and that's been rehabilitated. Bill Kristol has been rehabilitated. Henry Kissinger also been rehabilitated. It goes on and on. And trust me, Donald Trump will be added into that mix. Mark my words. Ronald Reagan's been rehabilitated. People like that's been rehabilitated. So, George Herbert Walker Bush has been rehabilitated. It'll happen. It'll happen. Now, the only one that has been rehabilitated, Republican candidate and Republican politician that has been rehabilitated when he was alive, that was worthy of rehabilitation, was the late Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona, because he was a proto-libertarian in the good sense of the term, and he was bothered by the religious right and the Jesse Helms-like influence in the Democratic Party. The Republican Party. And but anyway, those of us who are on the real left, those who stand up against corporate Democrats and neocon Republicans and the overall right, many of us are going to be denounced as crypto right wing or crypto fascist or crypto pro-Trump, because we don't drink the mainstream narrative of this country, and how sad it is, because thing about it is, many of us on the real left, dirtbag leftist types, whether they're on the online left or they're not online left, they're just ordinary leftists with a good sense of independence, will be vilified. And it's really crazy, because we support the labor movement, we support expanding union rights, we support Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, we oppose police brutality, we support immigration reform and this war, we oppose this war against immigrants, we oppose capital punishment, we support the rights of the Palestinian people, all these things. And then many of us going to be called, crypto fascist or crypto right wing or what have you. It's amazing what's happened. Everything is so topsy turvy these days, and just expect more of this this embrace of anti logic amongst the American political culture, pretty much on all sides and everything. But anyway, that's my little rant for today. If you like what you heard, press like and comment. Feel free to press like. Or if you don't like it, you don't have to like it. And if you have negative comment anyway. We'll have a conversation. Feel free to share that content on this channel. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it, because we are the muckrakers of our time. Also, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, so you're kept up to date by hard-hitting commentary by yours truly. I am American Social Democracy. Peace, class struggle, and let's end these damn wars. And stop rehabilitating war criminals like George W. Bush. Arrest that man, put him in The Hague. Charge him with crimes against humanity. You heard it from me first.